Welcome to The Lisa Show. Hey, we should be having this conversation over lunch. The Lisa Show is about being real, right? So let's not pretend like we always get it right with self-care. Let's talk about some self-care fails with my friends Ken and Katie Craig. What self-care have you tried that just did not work?
I tried acupuncture once.
And?
Does that count?
Yeah, totally. Why did you try it in the first place?
I had lower back pain, and I had a chiropractor that I went to, and I thought, I want to try something different and see if maybe that helps alleviate the pain. Mm-hmm. And, it's a little bit weird because it was in my lower back, so I'm sans clothes, and it was like it just felt like someone was...
Did you just say, sans clothes?
Yeah.
You just naked?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Continue.
This is a family podcast,
Yeah.
But it felt like someone was blowing blow darts. Like it was like it was just like I'm showing you, but it was like just kind of a sharp flick into my back. And I was like...
They were flicking you with rubber bands.
Yeah, it's kind of what it felt like. And no change came from it. So I tried it a couple of times, and I really wanted it to work. You know, you've got like the new age music playing, and I think there was a candle, and I thought this is going to be... It was so nice as an atmosphere that I thought, well, I don't feel any physically different, but I'm going to go one more time just to make sure. And it didn't.
Give it the old college try.
Yeah, and it didn't change anything. So I was kind of sad because I thought, oh, this could be a really good way to. And I've heard other people where it's worked for them. I thought this will be great, and it was nothing. Failed miserably, and I was sad.
Everybody's got their own thing, right?
For sure.
Like I would, I hardly ever get pedicures, but I love it, right? Like I think, oh, that would be so great, and one of my friends, Rebecca, was really stressed out. And I was like, you got to get a pedicure. And she's like, I would rather die. It is like torture. It's like for her, I don't want anybody touching my feet when they scrub your heel. And I'm like, oh, I love that part. You get all the dead skin off. She's like, no, it is torture. It is the opposite. And spending all that money and time just, it has a mental block for her. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, all the weird, things that are out there that you can try. I have a friend, my friend Sadie's trying to get me to do the cold plunge. She's like, listen, this is how I do self-care. She's got a ton of little kids, right? And she's like Mother Earth. And I just want to be like her, but I am not her. I want to be, but it's so hard. She's like, no, I go into this, ice water, basically. It's at a certain temperature and it's a certain da-da-da. She's like, it shocks your system. And she sent me articles about how it helps with depression and anxiety and mood. And I believe everything she's saying. I tried the other day I was taking a shower, which is scalding hot at all times.
Absolutely.
And I was like, maybe I could just make it lukewarm and then I could get up to cold and then I'd get the same effect. Nope. I'd get the same effect. I want to love it though, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't like public exercise. Like how people are like, I go to the gym. That's my place. That's my thing. Or I go to my class. I go to my Zumba or I go to whatever. I don't like publicly exercising. To me, it's too many other things. It's distracting. I'm a social person. So then I'm like, can we just chat and make jokes instead? That's me. I'm on the back row making jokes about what's happening and distracting people and not really exercising.
Right. It
when I've gone to
work. Those endorphins won't come.
Yes. No, I've gone to classes and I really am. I just I'm making I'm making up silly, dumb dance moves and I'm just, so public exercise is not, that one doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
We've never been on a cruise. Never. And I think a lot of people...
I've never been on a cruise, and that is the quintessential, everyone's like, you should go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You would love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if I would, and it's a lot of money to find out.
That's right, exactly.
It's not like picking up knitting.
I also I feel like I need to be willing. I feel like I need to be willing to put on about 20 pounds because I'm sure I will eat the whole time because they're like, food is constantly accessible. And I'm like, that's not good for me.
It just reminds me of that movie WALL-E. Where everybody is just sitting around eating and drinking soda. And I'm like,
it's kind of terrifying.
In theory, it sounds great, but then
I'm nervous enough. We've never taken a step towards doing it. I'm like, oh, sometimes that sounds fun or whatever. And then I'm like, obviously not enough for me to look into it because we've just never done it. So I'm not convinced that would be for me.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that typical self-care items will work, obviously, for everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also there's an idea that self-care is a reward right? Like, or it's like a break, oh, I did all this thing and now I need to, like, basically it's like rescuing. It's like, I'm at the end of my rope. Well, you better go do some self-care. But
right, like you get to critical mass and then you break down and then you indulge and then start the cycle.
And then you start again and you're like, well, now just nose to the grindstone again.
Instead of weaving it together, right?
I was having this discussion with my son, Miles, who is he's on the cusp of like the millennial Generation Z. So different generation than us. And I said, hey, what does self-care mean to you in your generation? And he said, well, he had a negative connotation of it. He's like, I feel like people in my generation use it as an excuse, say, to like they work, they get burned out or whatever, and they just use it as an excuse to stay home and eat ice cream in bed and not go to work. Like he said, to me, that's what I think my generation thinks self-care is. And I said, well, then what does that mean for you? And again, he doesn't speak for a generation. Right, and I'm certainly not trying to like throw an entire generation under the bus.
But it's his impression.
But it's his impression. And he said, for me, self-care is more about habits. Like, so doing things I don't like to do because I know that they're good for me, like going to the gym and exercising. I don't like it, but I know that is taking care of myself and that I like how I feel later about doing it or getting enough sleep. Like those two things are like huge self-care things for me. And I didn't expect that answer. I was very surprised.
It's very mature. You have a very mature son.
Well, I don't know.
That generation should be lucky to have Miles speaking for them.
I was going to say, I think he should speak for that generation.
Sure.
But it's still like a lot of paperwork needs to be done to get to that kind of level of spokesperson. So,
but what he's describing is more like sustainable. It's making lifestyle more sustainable.
Okay. On the flip side of that, though, too, like I work. My producer McKay is in a different generation, and he has actually modeled really great self-care in a different way, like with boundaries. And I'm laughing only because I'm his boss. Of when it's appropriate to like text and have like work conversations, and when to do it like during business hours and that kind of stuff. And and I just read an article too I believe it was in the Washington Post that talked about how the younger generation is better at that because the whole idea is you don't just work, hello, Generation X, until you burn out. Like it's never enough, all hours, always hustling, lean in like crazy. Yeah. You just work all the time, hustle culture. It's a reaction to that to take a step back and say, you should be able to live a life and have a career where you are not needing to burn out.
Yeah.
And then rest. And then go at a lightning speed and then rest and repeat. Instead, it should be sustainable.
Yeah. So you're not just putting everything into work, but you are putting energy into, physical well-being, into emotional well-being, into spiritual well-being. Like they're all kind of connected areas instead of there's work and then there's everything else. And when I'm working, I shouldn't be having to do everything else, or it would be a luxury to be able to do everything else. But really, those worlds can be woven together.
It's a better life.
Yeah.
Even this idea of having boundaries because I think it's a lot of people who do work from home, then it becomes very blurry. You never leave the office because it's at home with you. I can work anytime, and now I am working anytime. So I think what you're talking about is these emotional or time boundaries within a person's head, right? To say, I'm not going to send that email right now because I'm at home, in air quotes, as opposed to I'm at work, in air quotes.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like trying to help home time be home time that is separate. And that's the thing. Like when people were working in the office all day and the computer stayed in the office, then work stayed in the office. And then when the computer came home from the office, suddenly then it was like, oh, I could just send this email and then it's 9:00 at night. And you're like, why? I wouldn't be at my office right now. Why am I at my computer right now?
Well, and it's also too like how society and how different generations too value work. So I know something that I don't know if I'll ever be cured of this, to be honest, as Generation X, where like I am a recovering perfectionist, right? Which is its own thing. But also I get great value in my identity by what I accomplish, right? Like, and it's not just at work. It's like, oh, my house is clean. You know, my kids are fed and happy. I did a good job at work today.
Gold star.
Kind of like that mentality, so that the more you do and produce or accomplish, the more productive you are. How many times at the end of the day do I write out a list and look at all the things I did?
Yeah.
And isn't that a funny word to use to describe a person? Being productive.
She is so productive.
You guys, I was so productive today. It's like,
but
wait, am I a producer? Like it feels like part of a machine or something?
But being able to take a step back and look at that and go, okay, so I like to do that. I do come from a hustle culture. I get a thrill from it. It might not be the healthiest way to live, but as long as I'm aware of it, like treating yourself is great. And that is separate then, in my mind, to self-care.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think that hustle culture, or even that I was productive today, speaks to the meritocracy, where our worth is attached to how much we know, or how much we do, or what we accomplish, or what we do for work, or how many hours we spend, or how much we're killing ourselves for a work, right? And that can be like, people kind of wear that as a badge of honor sometimes, or that's how they judge their own worth, and which is dangerous. Like we really need to back up and say, I'm a person, and my worth comes from the fact that I exist. The fact that God made me. So that
I have a divine nature that is independent on what I do.
Exactly.
How I perform.
Exactly. Because think of even just the mental health ramifications, right?
Totally.
Or like, oh, I'm sick and I can't do things. What am I worth? What good am I? Right? So like there has to be that thing. And maybe that also ties into self-care, which is, because I am from God, because I matter just how I am, then I need to take care of me, who I am. And it's not because I wore myself out from a job that now I finally need to take care of myself and nurse myself back to health so I can go wear myself out again. It's more, because I matter and because my vessel matters, I need to take care of myself, and it will help me to do the work that I
have a greater capacity to help other people, to be happy,
to do these other things that feel engaging to me, that feel sustaining, that feel exciting to me.
Yeah. I have a friend that every time we catch up, I'm getting a resume. I'm getting a list of all the things that he's done.
And when we meet somebody, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
And that's right where we start off to like, okay, you're going to judge me in the first 5 minutes by how I respond to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's weird. It was even at his own kid's wedding. I was like, how are you feeling? Like, it's a big day or whatever. Well, I was up late working on this report, blah, blah. And it was like, you should not even be thinking about that today. But it's it's how he's wired, and is very aware of, am I measuring up?
By that, to some degree.
To some degree, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think we're getting a little bit better generationally. And I find, like, when I talked especially to, like, younger people, makes me sound. When I talk to the young folks, but younger people, instead of saying, "Oh, so what do you do for a living?" or whatever, I think, "What does your life look like right now?" or "What are you interested in right now?" That to me then
brings up a lot of fascinating answers. Right?
I think it's a more interesting way to start a conversation.
Yeah. And some of it I think is generational. Some of it I think is family culture, what you come from, because you can totally see people who that's how they feel like they're judged, or maybe that's why they're doing their job, is because, well, this is what my parents expect, or that's just how they run. This is how our family runs.
I know, so it's so weird.
It is.
What are you going to try next, self-care wise?
Ooh.
That's what I always think. If I think, I think of it differently.
Yeah.
So I think, I want this treat. Or I'm going to treat myself and go get my nails done or something like that. But I don't think about that as like my self-worth.
Yeah.
When I do think about it as a whole, I think, am I getting enough exercise? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I fueling my body in the best way?
Yeah.
Am I getting outside of my head? Like that kind of thing, like TikTok, from one sort of quadrant of my life, right? In a major focus. And I sort of like move that way. And I think it is an interesting conversation to ask other people like, oh, well, what are you trying to have, like better spiritual health or emotional health or mental health or physical health, and not being so hyper-focused on one of those areas.
Sure.
And to Miles' point, I think having habits, having things in place is maybe a crucial element to being able to have that balance, or to make sure that all those areas are, if you're only thinking, it's been a month, I should do something for my spiritual well-being, but if it's part of a habit, if it's part of a culture that you're doing this all the time, it's so much easier if something's in place, it's easier to do it habitually. So
I had an experience where I had an assignment in my church that was very intensive and required a lot of time. And it was also at a busy time of life where I had a lot of other assignments going on. And sometimes, depending on your assignment, then there can be almost like I'm going to kill myself for this thing, and I'm going to sacrifice everything else to this, and everything else is going to suffer. And I've actually been working really hard on saying, okay, this is the amount of time I have to work on this. And now that time is done, and I have to go to bed. And I will actually pray and be like, okay, that's the amount of time I could put in. I'm going to need you to make up the difference, because this is all I can give. And now it's on to the next thing. And that has been, it's a hard thing to do, because you will be tempted to second guess when it's at the end, the final thing, and people are saying, well, we should have started this, or we should have done this better. And so in your mind, then you're like, I know, it's the perfectionism. And I really had to dial myself back to that place and say, this is the offering that I gave this to God. And I felt like that offering was acceptable. And so that's what matters.
And how applicable is that to other areas in our life?
To everything.
It's almost like using, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's almost like you're saying time management as a self-care tool.
Absolutely.
Because you can always go above and beyond. You can always do more.
Right. Well, then I should change
and when is good enough.
Exactly.
But how you've been raised, of what that phrase means to you and what emotional response you have. But, it reminds me of in painting, of knowing when, most painters will tell you one of the hardest parts of painting is knowing when to walk away. Because you could mess with a painting and keep adding paint or changing it, or,
you could George
shifting
Lucas
it, especially
that
in
movie
oil
to
painting.
death.
Especially in oil painting.
Absolutely.
And same thing with editing a movie.
Yeah.
In different art forms, you have to know how much time to pour into it, and then when to stop and walk away from it. And I think that's applicable in so many different areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that I feel like I've been working on. But we can't judge our worth, or we can't even judge our effort or how well it was based on feedback, right? We really have to judge it on, did I give the offering I was supposed to give? Did I feel like this is I met my metrics, which were I'm going to give my best, or I'm going to spend this time, or I'm going to whatever. Did I meet that? Great. And we have to be able to leave that alone.
And not underestimate how hard it is.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, so many times, where I'm doing a voiceover, or I'm doing a commercial, or, a movie, where you're I really care about this and I want to do my very, very best. And you do it and you do it. And then at some point they have to be okay, that's enough take. We got to move on.
Yeah.
So bring your best, do it. And then sort of
say,
leave it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Should have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be able to say, okay, my worth doesn't depend on this thing. My worth doesn't depend on the effects. My worth, my job is to give my best effort, and then to be done, and then to be okay with that.
The Lisa Show is a production of BYU Radio. It's hosted by Lisa Valentine Clark and produced by McKay Menden and Becca Hurley, with music and post-production by Sam Clausen. If you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. The #1 way for podcasts to grow is by word of mouth, so we really appreciate it.